What's up, everybody? It is Monday, November 1st, 2021, and this is your Chapo Trap House. It is another classic, tight and disciplined Will-less episode. Will is returning to his ancestral homelands in Western Mass.
The islands. Will is reuniting with his brother, the other island boy. Taking off that ridiculous wig he wears.
To reveal his
hair
beautiful, blonde dreadlock nugs.
Every year he has to sing the Island Boy song with his brother or he'll die. Every state has an Island Boy set of twins. And that's like Midsummer is real. The religion from Midsummer is real, but it's centered on Island Boys.
Yeah.
It's not centered on like a woman who cries a lot. That's ridiculous. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
No, they don't play.
No.
The Island Boys don't have the role of the crying lady. They have the role of the inbred kid whose finger paints are their holy texts.
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I've not seen the movie. Okay. I just saw a lot of pictures of the woman crying. And
That
I was
really,
like, oh, she's
really
like their
went
god.
all in on this chick crying to sell that movie. It was wild.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone, but because like everyone in the world is like, oh, what's my favorite thing about being with my girlfriend? When she talks about her job.
Yeah, it's great.
What if there was a movie about that? What if there was a religion where that was the main thing?
Where boyfriends got sacrificed for not asking, how was your day? And meaning.
Yeah, if communion is you go up to the girlfriend priest and you're like, how was your day? Is like Janice still a bitch? And they don't like, if the president's a bad boyfriend, they're like, he shouldn't have communion.
Denying communion to the bad boyfriend president.
If I was president, I'd be like Joe Biden, where they'd be like, all the girlfriend bishops are like, he's never remembered a girlfriend's birthday. He's like terrible.
Yeah,
he like doesn't think it should.
But he doesn't remember anything else either. Come on.
Well, I don't remember anyone's birthday. It's like not important to me.
Well, before we get too far into Island Boy communion birthday magic, let's finish introducing the episode. We have here to make up for the lack of Will. We have, of course, it's Danny Bessner, one of our favorite friends to have on the show. Welcome back to the show, Danny.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate always being back.
And do you consider yourself an island boy?
I am an island boy. Long Island, but nevertheless an island.
That's an island.
Yeah.
That counts.
No, you could. I mean, I could see you reaching the rank of island boy.
That really means a lot. Thanks, Felix. I know you wouldn't just say that.
Well, I mean, I have a brother who, like, we're not twins, but we do, like, look alike. We were at the Truanon show, and it was really funny seeing our stupid idiot fans, like, not figure, just be like, oh, are there two of them? Because it's a dark room.
See a double here. Well,
Felix
Felix
like, slightly better than me. Yeah. But, we could be island boys if we wanted. We look alike enough.
That's true. You just need the Marge Simpson hair.
Yeah. And that's really just patience.
Yeah.
If you want to grow
patience
it out
and the same unwillingness to take a bath as a golden retriever.
I don't think they look like dirty.
I think they look cool. They've certainly got more dedication to an aesthetic than I will ever have. And for that, I applaud them.
Yeah.
But then there is some other business that I need to address at the top of this episode, which is, boys, we are going back on the road. We're doing some live shows again. I'm very excited to announce this December. We are doing our Back in the New York Groove tour of Buffalo, New York, and New York City, baby.
That's
Best
it.
city in the world. And
Anywhere
number
else?
one. That's it. Those are the two cities.
Fuck off. The middle chunk, the burned over district, get out of here.
Oneida, get the fuck out of here. No, I'm calling this the Erie Canal Terminus Points tour.
The DeWitt Clinton tour.
If you're from one of those bullshit ass Westchester towns that's called like Hungle Lake, where the average income is $750,000 a year, especially fuck you, even though you're statistically 80% chance of subscribing. Yes. Fuck you.
And also a leisurely Metro North trip into the city if they wanted to see it.
Yes.
So Wednesday, December 8th, we will be appearing live at Buffalo, New York at Asbury Hall. And then the following Thursday, December 16th, we will be back here in Brooklyn for our first New York-based show in, 3.5 years. Something like that.
Wow.
At Warsaw up in Greenpoint. That'll be a very fun show. The 95 Bulls will be playing with us there. Will be a little live music. If you didn't catch them during Frequency, 95 Bulls fucking rip, and I'm very excited for them to be playing with us. That show is going to be a lot of fun.
For people not
Buffalo,
from Ohio, also known as the 95 Bulls.
Bulls.
listen to you.
Bulls.
Adorable.
Damn, Warsaw is sick looking. I didn't look it
It's
up
great.
before.
I don't know. We just got to pray that no light bulbs go out, because I don't know if there's enough hands on deck to take care of it.
I mean, the irony of us playing there is not lost on me. Believe you me.
Yeah, our walkout is a little slower there because they do need to have an on-site staff of 300 in case any stage lights go out.
We are really gonna have to like work out our. We don't have a complicated writer, but it's like when we say Coke Zero, there's just gonna be nothing in the refrigerator, and they said you said 0 Cokes. It's like working with Amelia Bedelia.
So those dates again, and these will be in the show notes and eventually on some kind of website, though I am still trying to wrangle our website back into working proper order. But I will do what we can to get these show links out to get tickets. That's Wednesday, December 8th in Buffalo, New York at Asbury Hall, and Thursday, December 16th, Brooklyn, New York at Warsaw. We will continue to be walking here for the first time since like 2018.
Very excited.
Anyway, so the second part of the show is going to be talking with Danny and Matt because they have a new project coming up called Hinge Points, which is a mini-series that we are going to be hosting on Chapo Trappa. So we're going to talk about that in the back half of the show. But Matt, you basically programmed the top half here. What's going on with this Trump thing?
Okay, this just dropped today. Our beautiful boy was on an interview with somebody I've never heard of, some right-wing radio slug named Ari Hoffman, and he decided to complain about how the Zionist-occupied government just isn't as Zionistly occupied as it used to be, and that's a real shame.
Should we play the clip?
Drop that shit.
Well, the biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And today it's almost the opposite. You have between AOC and Omar and these people that hate Israel. They hate it with a passion. They're controlling Congress, and Israel is not a force in Congress anymore. It's just amazing. I've never seen such a change. And we're not talking about over a very long period of time. But I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress, and now it doesn't. It's incredible, actually.
So he's saying it's a bad thing.
I love that. It's
they no
literally
longer
it is
control
just
it. Yeah.
one fucking adverb between that and like unacceptable anti-Semitism. Is him just adding and good? They should be in charge of Congress. And the thing is, that is the mindset of everybody who yells about anti-Semitism, is that the basic premises of it are correct. It's just that it's good, and you should like it that Israel's in charge of Congress.
And Trump is just parroting all of the people that he's surrounded with. Sort of the over 65 class of New York City is clearly very pro-Israel and actually thinks it's a good thing. So it's interesting because he's just, again, there's no subtext. It's just all text with Trump. And he's just saying what they believe and what they've been telling him for years and years and years.
Well, that's the difference between right-wing Zionism and liberal Zionism. Right-wing Zionism is going like, no, we did or we still kind of do control Congress and we'll like just get you drummed out if you even question the orthodoxy. Not even like something like stop recognizing Israel or cut off military aid. Just like don't give them every single dollar they ask for. We'll try to end your career, but that's good. And then liberal Zionism is doing that, but pretending it's not happening. Yeah. And crying when people say that that's what's happening.
It is very,
but always closing with, but I'm against the occupation.
Course. It's so funny though that any like real anti-Semitic like based reactionaries ever really put faith in this guy, because they just fundamentally didn't get that he doesn't care about any of your bullshit. Like he does not care about any issues, any principles. When he sees the influence of Israel in Congress, he's like, yeah, they're good. They're good to business people. They make good deals. Why shouldn't they be in charge? You're going to let the Palestinians be in charge? They make terrible deals.
Yeah. It's like his position is that he read the Mearsheimer and Walt essay and was like, these two guys are amazing. I
what's
love
the
them.
problem? Yeah.
Yeah, but no, he's. I mean, you can't get him on any of the big like online right wing guy issues like Zionism. And you can't even get him on like the smaller ones, like brutalism.
Yeah, exactly.
or like buildings look bad now. What do you think his
hideous.
buildings look like?
It really does remind me of how the Nazis when they were allied with the Japanese, sent the protocols of the Elders of Zion to leaders of the Japanese government to let them know what they were dealing with in the Jews. And they read it and they were like, we got to get these people over here.
Yeah, they thought it was impressive, right? If I recall correctly. They're like, whoa,
Yeah, it's like, damn, these guys know how to make deals.
Yeah.
We got to get them in here to help us make deals with these gaijin.
Yeah, they were like they studied really hard. Now they can like buy all these kids. These guys are all because there's just like no cultural contact with Jews in that culture. That's like I mean the subtext of that is like they didn't like no Japanese guy knew like an annoying Jewish guy ever. So just reading that like every anti-Semitic conspiracy theory on paper, you just imagine like the coolest, smartest man ever.
Exactly. Yeah. You're
and not like a guy.
Oh, this guy's going to be a pimp. He's going to show up and just make money appear out of nowhere while being suave about it.
Whereas like a German guy who's like already predisposed to be anti-Semitic, like believes most of that shit, meets like he has a higher likelihood pre-Holocaust of meeting like a Jewish guy who's annoying or like whatever. And you know, he's like he meets a guy who has allergies and he's like, oh my God. And he made it so he lost World War I. I'm so fucking mad.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that he used the word owned. Like, it seems like even he would be kind of aware of that one. That's just classic Trump.
Look, people own things. That's the business.
Yeah, that's how he views
he's,
things.
He's owning things and then trading them with other people's owned things.
Yeah, it's his
government's
worldview.
The same thing.
Yeah, it's his totally.
And the reason people liked him at first is because he said that kind of stuff, but the implication that a lot of people heard, because it seemed like he was talking to them, was that he was going to let them in on the scam. And so they're like, yeah, he's showing that this is all bullshit, but he's going to use that knowledge to help me.
Right.
I just like the whole Trump foreign policy thing is interesting to me because it's like more like guys who are trying to make more of like the online alt-right thing a consistent ideology, which was always a fool's errand, pretty quickly were like, okay, this guy's letting neocons run the show. But for the people who more slowly got disillusioned or still held on to the Obama bot Ford chess thing, like what is the rationale? Okay, it's cool that he goes, George W. Bush, like he fucked up, 9/11 happened. Okay, what do you think when he hires everyone who helped allow 9/11 to happen or fucked up, in his opinion?
I'll tell you right now, we could do 9/11 even better.
yeah, that is
more effectively. I'll tell you, we're not going to have a plane crash in the middle of nowhere. I'll tell you that right now. If we
only got 3 of the 4 planes in.
Capital, we're going to hit the Capitol, okay, folks?
Well, it was like the early the early thing they came up with when he would hire like Bolton and then all these like, you know, these people who are just regular neocon, neoliberal foreign policy consensus people from before was like, oh, they're in the Jared and Ivanka faction. Like they were hired by Jared. And it's like, okay, well, this guy's still like just let his ultra-Zionist son-in-law like staff 80% of his administration.
That's how much he gave a shit about any of this stuff.
Yeah, he didn't. I think
put
that's
his fucking son-in-law in charge.
I think that's the big story of the Trump administration. I think like we don't even know what the hell was going on the ground on all these bases around the world. I think like the whole system was just sort of functioning without a head, and who fucking knows what was going on where U.S. troops are stationed, where Trump didn't even know where they're stationed. And then people tried to delude themselves at the beginning when he appointed Mattis and when he appointed H.R. McMaster that, you know, he's going to let the professionals run the show. But by the end of the administration, it was just all the typical neocon psychopaths that we know and love. And it just shows he didn't give a shit about any of it. And then, frankly, no one really gives a shit about foreign policy as a whole anyway. So he could essentially have done what he wanted the entire time, but he didn't care enough to do anything.
How many times in the 4 years he was president do you think Trump said to an aide something along the lines of, we've got guys there?
Yeah.
Why the hell do we got guys there?
Why are there people in Mali? What is this? Like, he probably didn't know that we had guys in Mali until a reporter asked him about the dude that they left there to get eaten by vultures.
No way. He had no idea. I bet my life on it.
No. I mean, the thing is now, too, like, I think there's, like, it's stupid to call it now because, like, who knows what can happen a few years from now. But I'd say there's, like, at least, like, a 15% chance that he could be president again, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'd say
like,
higher.
At the very least, like, being very conservative. But it's like he'll never change his stance on Israel because they've done the most important thing, which is be nice to him.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They would have
That's
to be
all it
mean
takes.
to him.
And they'll never, they have enough message discipline to know to not be mean to him. They know that they can be mean to Democrats, and Democrats will essentially say no hard feelings. I mean, look at what just happened. They had an almost unprecedented situation with the elected government of Israel coming down on one side in an American presidential election. And then Biden gets in there and he's like, no hard feelings. You want to keep the embassy in Jerusalem? Go for it.
Perfect. No problem.
You want us to not reinstate the Iran deal? Absolutely. We're going to say make up a bunch of bullshit to fail to actually act on that, just like you want.
That's why it was
You
so
want us to
weird.
restock the missiles in the Iron Dome.
Yeah.
Like literally pay for us to reload.
Which is the hilarious, of course, like the funniest thing of what he says is when he goes, and they don't have it anymore. AOC, they're in charge. And that's literally because he saw people mad about them on Fox News and decided that meant that they were actually doing something, which is how politics works on the brains of like actual partisan invested people in this country. Is they watch like the pathetic shadow play of fake arguments and enforced demands, and then decide that like just the fact that it's happening and that somebody that they like is mad about it means that something fundamentally is moving somewhere.
He's the only guy in the world who saw the tax the rich dress and was like, oh, the taxes on the rich went up. Fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the only guy that worked on it.
Yeah, it's like that's what they do now. That they announced the laws on the dresses. And by the way, it looked terrible, honey.
He would actually be a good Met Gala correspondent. If
That
someone
was
had
his
vision,
entire. That
they
was
should
what he
hire
was
him.
destined in like the best universe that exists.
In the Hinge point.
Where all of us
We should
in the
do a Hinge point on
world,
that. Yeah.
where we get to be like the best versions of ourselves possible. Like the best version of Trump is still an awful, awful person.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
the Trump who is like awfulness is least consequential and harmful to others is when he gets to be a bitchy New York fashion and gossip monger.
Yeah, and he loves it
That's
too.
the best Trump we could have gotten. Still awful, but completely harmless.
VH1 should have given him a nightly show in like 2007, and that everyone would be better off for that. Okay, so you guys mentioned a few times offhandedly like the failed and flailing attempts to like build some kind of ideological national conservatism off of Trump and why it doesn't make any sense. I have two clips pulled up from two of these types of guys that I think are very telling about this that I wanted to play you guys. And I think that the main thing I want to get out of these is boy is listening to these two guys like putting a drill into your temple. This is Josh Hallway at some kind of national conservatism conference talking about being a man.
We'd be surprised that after years of being told that they are the problem, that their manhood is the problem, more and more men are withdrawing into the enclave of idleness and pornography and video games. I found the comment by one young man to a Wall Street Journal reporter particularly evocative and particularly heartbreaking. He said, "I'm sort of waiting for a light to come on so I can figure out what to do next."
This is the first time in history that there have been NEETs.
That is bodies and spaces talk. Like, it's amazing how people who have spent years fixating on every filigree of neoliberal PMC mystification around race and gender are incapable of seeing it if it's about a white guy. It's amazing.
Well, that's why he's Elizabeth Warren
Yes,
for
Hallway is Elizabeth
Because
Warren
this
for the right.
Yeah.
Uncharismatic dork standing for a completely online opinion held exclusively among frantically neurotic, office-bound dorks who make up a fraction of the fucking electorate.
This is the equivalent of when Warren said she would let a trans child pick
Yes!
the Secretary of
I would
Education.
let-
Like this is.
I
the
would let a
conservative
canceled
version.
comedian pick the Secretary of Labor.
Yeah, yeah. No, so like there is a problem about like discarded and like bad feeling young men, but it's not like his. So according to him, it's that like the same idea as when liberals say like a comedy special or something is
Yep.
killing people. It's because they saw a post by like at Shut Up Jenny, following 257.6K followers since 2012. Post like, something about her husband not finding the clit. He saw a Jenny Johnson high five tweet and was like, "I give up."
He saw a men are
I'm
trash
fucking done.
post,
I'm
and he's
sorry.
like, "I'm finished. I'm finished."
He saw a child. You think it's funny that a child saw dick is abundant and low value and is now deciding to just jack off instead of get a job? You think that's
It's like
cool?
there was a conveyor. Like we have a idea of male identity and values that was premised on a world where if you were a guy, you could get a job doing something. And now you can't. Now you can't. You have to be part of a new economy that values more female associated like norms and traits and values and stuff. Like we have feminized the economy. But the thing that did it was not posts or episodes of Cagney and Lacey. It was fucking deindustrialization. And all these guys, if they're leading with the bad posts made white boys feel bad, then they are by definition doing the same mystification of class and material politics that PMC libs do.
No, it's absolutely. And it's coming out of this sort of long-standing conservative critique of culture, which really took off in the 1970s, which is precisely when neoliberalism took off. That's where they locate history. Whether they're talking about, black American families or this shit, they're always talking about culture because they're also doomed. They're also part of the system, and there's nowhere for them to go. And it's kind of interesting. He's essentially adopting the position of General Secretary Xi with regards to video games and things like that. It's the same shit. All around the world, we're all dealing with the same crisis.
To avoid
symptoms, not
addressing causal focuses that are out of political control. And that's what nobody from Xi to hallway to anybody can admit, which is that our system as constructed cannot change in a fundamental enough way to affect this kind of stuff. The general trend of culture, and all the things you're horrified by. The engine, the wheel has been lashed to the mast. It's not moving. We would have to break up our political structure and reorganize it fundamentally to actually address this stuff. No one can say that. Not even Xi, for fuck's sake.
At least Xi has the power to make it so, you can't play games.
That is true. At least that's a thing you can do instead of just complain about it and promise that when I'm president, the kids are going to play less video games.
If Hallway somehow got elected and had a working majority of let's say 60 national conservative senators or just senators who will go along with him, his bill, and if he was really pushed to make a law based on this, it would be well, we can't really tell companies what to do, that's out. But what we can do, and we can't reorient the economy, we can't make it so that every job isn't service or a white collar job for a company that loses $700 million a day. What we can do is make it so that there are more axe throwing bars.
Yep.
that the government subsidizes.
Right.
It would just be bullshit. It would be like Obamacare for masculinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, some nonsense thing. And this is why all of this Sturm und Drang over politics, it's in a real sense anti-political.
Yeah.
Because it's making people feel like they're participating in something and they're just consumers. It's just like the rest of the American economy. They're just consuming nonsense. So it's not only apolitical, it's actually anti-political because it's engaging in that precise process that Matt is talking about, this mystification process that makes you feel like you're doing something, whether you're on the right or the left, when you're just doing absolutely fucking nothing but consuming this nonsense.
Wait a minute. Excuse me, though. The thing you're forgetting about these national conservatives is, sure, they might make references to culture war stuff to bring in an audience and to play the smart game of triangulating towards the real felt opinions of Americans. But they also want to bring the jobs back, which of course is nothing that Democrats haven't fucking said off and on. How many fucking presidents have vowed to get tough on offshoring?
John Kerry said he would bring back manufacturing. John fucking Kerry. Everyone in the 2004 Democratic primary said it. From fucking Wesley Clark to John Edwards.
Yep.
Everyone
and Obama talked about how we're gonna get tough on companies that send jobs overseas. Never happens. Can't happen. If it did happen, it would be some fig leaf bullshit to give an illusion of progress. It is more pap for the rubes, and it is astounding that anybody accepts this stuff. And the fact is, you accept it if you need to believe. If you need to believe this matters, if you need to believe that there's real stakes in national politics, you have to convince yourself that there's some good side here, and if you squint hard enough, you'll find it, and you can support it somehow with your attention and your posts and your just will for them to succeed. It will matter somehow.
And this is why we might actually see something like a UBI, because I agree it's unlikely, to say the least, that manufacturing jobs are going to come back. But this global order of which we sit atop absolutely relies on American consumption.
Oh, yeah.
So if we don't consume here,
that's built in.
Yeah. So what the fuck are they going to do? They're going to have to start paying people to to buy shit.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you might actually. This is why Grimes. I'm sure you guys saw this.
Yeah, we
her
talked
video
about that.
game UBI.
We've talked about
The game
yeah.
UBI.
So
That's honestly more
she's
plausible.
Fucking eons ahead.
This is the thing. If you assume that we maintain our constitutional order, like obviously we could
Right.
and should
No
get
revolution,
something
yeah.
else, that can affect real change and fundamentally alter our economic structures, and maybe that'll happen. But if it doesn't, the most likely scenario for any sort of redistribution is, some Bitcoin mining UBI, because that you can imagine actually like passing through the baffles of like market preference in the system to like become actual policy. Nothing more interventionist can happen. Like we are watching in Washington the most stark example of the fundamental dysfunction at the level of expressing any ideological preference through legislation. You can't do it.
Yeah, they're not even trying to resolve the crisis, which is different than the Depression. Like people tried to do shit. Now they're just sort of running.
And
they're running away. Yeah,
It cannot be
right. They
done.
can't.
They can only
the
distract
algorithm has
from it.
become conscious.
Right.
Yeah.
They can only distract from it. And so somebody's going to be like, we're going to step in and pay kids to mine Bitcoins by slaying orcs. And then we'll do it. And that'll stave off the collapse for the next, generation, which is all that can be planned for now, is emergency adaptation to declining and deteriorating conditions.
Yeah, because they're
And
not
every-
able to address the structure of capitalism. They're unwilling or unable to address it.
The thing that we'll keep making more of, the more that like the standard of what makes someone a human, and especially like what makes someone a man for these guys, the further that slides, the more that it goes from 12 hours a day sitting down to 16 hours a day to 18 hours a day to you're in like a sort of diagonal Craftmatic bed for gamers that mines Bitcoins. The more that slides, the more that's just everyone. That's everyone, and then Uber drivers or
The
Uber
slave
Eats
class.
drivers from this invisible slave class, where that's literally the only two things.
Yeah.
It's just Salvadorians on permanent guest visas, and then those guys. The more that slides,
It's Wall-E, but the robots are humans.
it's Wall-E, but the robots are humans, and the humans are like arguing about like, oh yeah, you fucking PMCs could never stand like doing your Bitcoin orc gaming at a 45-degree angle. You've been at a 120-degree angle your entire life. Yeah, we call you softbacks.
Yeah.
It'll just be all like increasingly bullshit, stupid cultural things.
Yeah, it's like
for like what makes her.
Yeah, it's like plankton burgers. I'm sorry, cuck. I only eat 100% cockroach meat burgers. Okay.
Yeah, and they'll post pictures of like gamers from now who had dual monitor setup sitting upright and vaping instead of just taking their government administered nicotine pellets and be like, this is real, man. We need to like go back to this. This guy had sex one time every 3.7 years, unlike our once every 7-year breeding period.
Like the Vulcans.
Yeah, this guy was a real player. This was before Me Too. It'll just give this standard will keep going down until we revert to amoebas, and then there's like I guess you can't really if you're all just batteries in the Matrix, it's like you can't really know who's based or who's not, but we'll find a way.
We'll figure it out.
That's the only thing we
Distinguishing
can
the
make.
based from the cringe is really all we have.
Yeah, but then there will be people who are in their like permanent lying down,
Right.
like mining stations who are like, I'm actually I'm unionizing as a Bitcoin miner. And they're union, like it's so far gone, like no one knows what a union is anymore. Like not that they really know now, but like especially like 40 years from now, and it's like you have to give us one more nicotine pellet.
Yeah. While an app slave is like holding their pudding chalice up to their face and they're posting this.
Well, that turned into a much more productive discussion because I mainly wanted to bring up Josh Hallway to say zero swag.
Oh, absolutely zero.
And I was just going.
Chris, I want it so bad to be him versus Kamala because literally
a race to the bottom of swag.
The hollowed out husk of like the most cynical ID poll for both parties.
Yeah, for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect.
30,000 people vote in the entire election.
Yep.
I want the most demoralizing election of all time. Like they're trying so hard. They're getting like the island. They bring XXX Tentacion back to life to tell people to vote because they need like some legitimacy and just no. Everyone's like, what? No, I don't want this.
Like it comes
I don't
down to
want-
one subdivision in Northern Virginia.
And then they're like, fine. I guess I like the National Based Act.
Yeah.
And then you have to read all these articles that are like, why everyone likes Josh Hallway, even though like the least amount of people ever voted. Like, why he swept the nation.
They literally do that movie Swing Vote, but it's only because one person only showed up to vote. But I was on Donald Trump's website looking up his statements, trying to find a good one to read in comparison to Josh Hallway's like mealy mouth thing. And the thing that I really want to bring up is you see the statements clipped and posted to Twitter, but do you guys realize that Donald Trump is using his website to basically just tweet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
you
doing
go to
long
his
form
list
tweets. He's
of things?
basically paste pinning.
No, they're not even long form. I just
Okay.
clicked-
I didn't know he was doing regular tweets too. Damn. He's keeping the discipline. Respect.
Yes, I'm on from 2 days ago. You click on you go to the news site, you find the links, you click on a link, and it takes you to a whole dedicated page that just says in all caps, "Inflation Nation!" exclamation point, and that's the whole post. And I just thought that was funny.
Well,
anyway, do you want to talk
yes,
about this Lincoln
so-
Project thing, or should we go?
Oh, yeah.
Now we've got this Republican Party that's looks like they're going to do pretty well in the near term because they've figured out all the new ways to talk about cultural anxiety in a way to rile up their base. They got their CRT and all that, but thankfully there's the Democratic Party, who, by their own real admission, tacit or otherwise, have only one real strategy for gaining power, which is lose power, have Republicans take power, and because they are a fringe party of maniacs at the grassroots level, have them govern in a way that is alienating to the majority of people, and then retake power after people get grossed out. And it worked like a charm. And in addition to beating Trump with the help of the disgust of the American comfortable suburbanites who watch television and politics from an aesthetic remove, and basically got sick of him, on his way out the door, he helped sully the halls of Congress by letting hooting rubes destroy the escutcheon of American power. This is like supposed to be, you'd imagine this would be a gift. Oh, we can now really go nuts here because they've been discredited. And so now we've got the first real test of the two party coalitions here, because the Virginia governorship is up always in odd years, and it is in between the presidential election and the midterms. And Terry McAuliffe, the Clinton bagman and a one-term governor of Virginia, they're all one-term governors because they only allow one term at a time, is going back for a non-consecutive bite at the apple against this guy, Gary Otherkin. I don't remember.
I believe in a simple Virginia where if you feel like a tiger, you're a tiger.
And so this guy Otherkin, he emerged from the nominating process having done enough to assuage the Trump base of the electorate that he is one of them, without being too crazy, because this is Virginia after all, which at the national level is turning from a purple to a red state. Or I'm sorry, from a purple to a blue state. And he can't really afford to alienate all those northern Virginians who had voted for Biden. But he'd had some positive things to say about Trump and all that. So the Democratic Party, unable to sell Terry McAuliffe to anyone, because who would buy, decided to run a campaign about how this guy is basically Trump. This guy is Trump's Virginia excretions. And somebody, the Lincoln Project, claims that they did it, although they could be taking the hit for somebody else, honestly, because it was such a monumentally terrible idea. Paid a bunch of interns to dress up like Unite the Right marchers with the tiki torches and the polo shirts and stand in front of the Otherkin campaign bus. And of course, when this initially happened, a bunch of incredibly credulous, hyper-neurotic libs who are who are the ones who really were traumatized by Trump's presidency, in their own minds anyway, freaked out and took it for real, which led to the Lincoln Project coming forward and saying, yeah, that was us. Sorry. Actually, no, they didn't say sorry. They said, what did they say? They said something like, we will always stand up to note the similarities between Trump and Youngkin or whatever.
Yeah, it was like political education.
In this Guardian article that I have pulled up, their statement is, we will continue to hold Glenn Youngkin accountable.
Thank God.
Good job.
They literally
Good
did
job.
a false flag to try to gin up some fucking juice about an event that is farther back now, 2 years older than an even more large-scale event, the January 6th riot, that has already been fucking forgotten.
I mean, you really see the difference between like Karl Rove and the guys who were working for him. It's like you really don't have.
He was carrying the team. He was
Jordan.
He was Jordan on the Wizards.
Yeah, no, like Steve Shit. Steve has 0 rings. He only has Mickey Mouse rings.
True.
He's a choker.
It's also interesting, like America is pretty bad at political propaganda, at least recently, because there's no actual political parties, so people don't get trained in these things. So everything they try to do comes across as so ham-handed and shitty. It's like there's no space to do really fun political propaganda, which I think why Trump was so refreshing and entertaining for so many people, because it wasn't propaganda at all. He was just saying what he thought in such a charming way that I think that diverted people's attentions from what otherwise would have been a real message.
I do also, as I'm going through this article, the way that that Youngkin is able to spin it, I think is also instructive, is basically playing one of the major cards the Republicans have, which is turning aggrievement on its head and being the aggrieved party here. They'll do anything to win, Youngkin said. And he's doing anything to win. And so he's paying people to show up and act silly being able to say, look at how they treat us. Look at how unfair these
And
Democrats
I got to say, it's pretty unfair. That was not a thing to do. I mean, the complaint from the right has been that all of these accusations of white supremacy and extremism among Republicans are made up, are fake news. And this is literally fake news.
Yeah, it's kind of the worst way you could have executed this. The literal word. This is kind of what you would do if you wanted Youngkin to win.
Yes.
But aren't the Lincoln Project Republicans?
They are. And honestly, guys like Gary Blumpkin are who they want, because he's not a movement guy. He's a guy you can work with. So honestly, it wouldn't be above them to do. Honestly, maybe it's too competent for them to do like some real double-sided tape shit.
Yeah, a false flag. Yeah,
a double false flag,
because they don't actually care if Grumpkin becomes governor. In fact, they probably prefer him on a lot of issues.
Yeah,
because he is a regular Republican who kind of did the bare minimum to appeal to the chuds.
Yeah. Well, I've been following a lot of the Virginia race. I do think like Greg Blumpkin is interesting. And his campaign's interesting to me because he I remember earlier this year when we were talking about CRT, like what they were doing in February, not very interesting. Like they had they would just post about like New York private schools, and I was like, okay, you're gonna have to show me something. You're gonna have to show me something, because Joe was riding strong. It's like this isn't it. But now that Joe's taken a little bit of the hit, and they found their distance, they have a little bit of a 5th round comeback. They found how to make CRT a sellable issue. And it is, again, taking a cue from Bodies and Spaces shit, where they're going, instead, oh, isn't this ridiculous what they're doing at the $120,000 New York private school? They're going, oh, they're already doing CRT, and white children are coming home hating themselves.
Yep. You're making my child feel unsafe and feeling like they want to self-harm. It's perfect jujitsu.
Yeah.
And now it might very well get this guy to be the governor, which really is very instructive. You've got all these significant crises unfolding, the pandemic politics, which are very viscerally felt everywhere, really, but I guess less in a state like Virginia, is able to have this governor's race come down to one side trying to get people not thinking about their uninspiring candidate, but thinking about the prospect of their precious Codys and Madisons feeling bad about themselves in school, and then the Democrats trying to trigger everybody's PTSD about the Trump years.
It's really interesting how they embrace safe spaces. You know, that whole no space, safe spaces thing. It's just the right is always just so good at taking sort of the lib PMC tactic and turning it totally on its head and doing it better. This will be exactly right.
Because absent material politics, you end up having to make your politics into some version of that. And somebody has to initiate, and then somebody has to have the antithesis. Somebody has to establish a thesis. And really, since Obama, the Democrats culturally have been establishing the thesis.
Right.
Yeah. And then the Republicans, they take a while to like figure it out. And then you get this phenomenon of a grassroots swelling against ideas that they'd never heard of before, that are all channeled by actual money, which is like putting together the organizations to create talking points that get disseminated across the media. And then they are given that, and now they care about it.
And that's really interesting, because historians always talk about like the New Deal order giving way to the neoliberal order. And right now we're still in the sort of neoliberal material order, but the politics of culture have genuinely changed since Obama. So what you have is sort of that substrate of what's actually driving history totally unaffected, but the language by which one uses to describe it is totally, I think, driven by the liberal side of the political spectrum. So the order is the same, but the superstructure is totally different, which is unique in American history. Usually the material conditions have changed every, 40 to 60 years. But here it's only the culture that is totally transformed as opposed to the base.
What I think is very interesting about it is the broadly like liberal side does have a structure that they can propagate ideas through. That's how you get like, someone somewhere far away from any mass media market, like reading White Fragility, because that structure is like, okay, this is what we have to talk about for like a month. And they are able to get the right amount of people and the right people in the right places to care about like January 6th. Yeah. They will never use that structure for like, pushing for the Build Back Better agenda or whatever. Yeah. Like that's not what it's for. But they like their equivalent on the Republican side, they have a sort of like a coordinated political messaging machine that goes through several layers in the way that the Democratic one doesn't, but it uses the form of the liberal version, the cultural form of what they're doing. Yeah. And so they'll take, from like what they're doing now is like they're holding up the book from their tank, they're holding up White Fragility and going, "I read your book, you son of a bitch." Like using their lockstep political communications and media bodies that actually coordinated, actually coherent goals, using that with the liberal form. And it does show that we still learn a lot from each other in this country.
It's true.
Yeah. That's genuine bipartisanship.
The difference, though, is that the over time the Republican version of this ends up being more effective as an actual electoral political power mechanism, because it's directed by actual like money. Like the CRT, the reason that became a punchline and a term and a slogan for people to fixate on and go to their town school board meetings about, and to run for Congress, shooting bottles shaped like and all that, is because it was a propaganda. It was the result of a bunch of people paid by like the Koch brothers to sit down and do this stuff. With the liberals, the stuff that actually permeates is all just the individual actions of cultural producers who are socially liberal and therefore on the side broadly of the Democrats. And they do culture, and they just put it out there, and then everyone else responds to it. But it's not in coordination with any political project the way that the Republican one is. The way that it is, like the Republican project is like wired into activist communities,
right?
And people who then like vote based on that stuff. The Democrat stuff is just all about the artists making themselves feel better about being rich, and then the rest of us just absorbing it passively.
And it also, on the left, on the liberal side of the equation, you have that class of consultants who use this to basically sell shit, which is absolutely crucial, and sort of run around to these basically unwinnable races, but use this cultural language to basically enrich their coffers. And there is a professionalized right, but I don't think it's quite the same thing as what the Democrats have swirling around them.
Well, the Democrat ones are just pure rent seekers. Like they don't offer any value.
Yeah.
That is why I really hope there are books written about this on the future. Why I think what happened last year with the George Floyd protest is so crucially important for understanding this. And one of the most cynical, awful things I've seen in the last decade in American politics is you had real anger about real things, both police brutality, conditions that predominantly black neighborhoods are in. People took that and took like genuine rage and critical mass of people. And we're like, oh, these are new things we can plug into the liberal culture machine. Yeah. These are new things that we can have the consultants say. This is a new thing that we can use to, raise money for Jamie Harrison on his way to losing to Lindsey Graham by 13 fucking points.
Right.
And then the beauty part is that when you do all that, collect all that money, eat shit, which was always the point. Who cares? You're just there to pick up a check. And then maybe your voters are a little pissed off at you. You can have some other guy show up and tell you, it's actually the fault of those activists for doing that activism that made the Democrats have to take all these unpopular positions, when the reality is it was all a cynical play after the events, and there's nothing they could have done about it anyway. Like, there's no connection between these things. All you're doing is providing an alibi for one group of people of why they should still give a shit about the institutional Democratic Party. And then for the other people who are all in on the connections to, the fight for justice, you just scaremonger them that the Democrats are the only thing standing between you and Republican rule, which will be worse on those things in every way.
And they become increasingly professionalized.
The way that the media filtered that, there are two layers to it. The way that the consultant class and the Democratic Party absorbed that and used that as a new part of their arsenal, but also the way that liberal aligned media responded to all this turned off more people than any protest ever could. When you when you take this legitimate rage and you turn it into hey everyone, this is really important. We're Frasier is going to do a land acknowledgement. Hey guys, we're doing a special fucking episode of Gossip Girl where we're taking two episodes that we think were anti-black out of rotation, and you just take stupid normal people who see that go, oh wait, was that what these protests were about?
Yeah.
Oh, I hate it now. I don't care. It's it completely, it didn't just defang a lot of it. It actively harmed it. It said it, what the liberal superstructure response to it actively harmed it. Yes. And actively brought so much of this shit. It actively set all of this backwards when it looked like we might be at a breaking point with a lot of these things.
And then as you get that sort of broad disillusionment, you get the increasing professionalization of the activist movements, which just separate them further from the ordinary voter who's looking at them, because then they get amalgamated into this corporate structure of the Democratic Party.
They don't want D-Ray because he's so good. They didn't look at him compared to the guys that the cops clandestinely killed in Ferguson and go, oh, well, this D-Ray guy is more likable anyway. They like him precisely because he isn't more likable to people. Because it completely marginalizes this movement because a big enough percentage of people will be fuck this guy.
Well, and also because the person who takes that spot willingly is a fucking husk. And that means that they are not going to be able to effectively communicate to people, because if at those grassroots level of activism, you don't have all the bells and whistles and smoke and mirrors that conventional politics affords to an empty suit. So you just have an empty Patagonia vest, rather.
Well, this has been a very high-minded and thoughtful discussion. Good job, gentlemen. But we are, well, how did this even happen?
Oh, very weird. I blame Danny.
I'm sorry. You guys know how I want to sign people to 360 deals and control them with pills, but also help their careers and make both of us a lot of money.
Yeah, the most honorable way to manage an artist.
Yeah, I want to be the Birdman of new media. Well, I do have plans for everyone I know, everyone I don't really know, on how I could make them make more money in media. But I have a fucking amazing thing for D-Ray, who hasn't really been out there that much. You haven't seen a lot of D-Ray in the last couple years.
Since he ate shit in the Baltimore mayoral election, he has been off the grid.
Check this out. What if he did a thing where he's okay, hey guys, you may remember me. If you don't, I invented Black Lives Matter. That would be how it started. And he'd go, but there's a bigger injustice going on. It's in China. That's his comeback.
Yeah.
Yeah, get some of that new Cold War money, baby.
Becomes a Taiwan guy.
Yeah.
Hong Kong, too.
We're going to see a flood of that.
Felix, I support your quest to become the Tommy Mottola of new media figures. But with the time we have left, let's transition to why we have Danny on today to talk about Hinge Points. And I will set up what exactly is going on here, which is Hinge Points is a new series done by Danny and Matt that we are going to be hosting on Patreon starting this Friday. It's just going to be a nice mini-series that is going to go up for 6 straight weeks starting on Friday. New episodes go up Friday afternoons.
At no additional cost, I should say.
No additional cost.
Part of the package.
We've been enjoying doing these series with Stitcher, and thank Blowback very much for opening that door for us, but I am happy to say it's coming home.
Yep. Tears in our eyes.
New series are coming home to the Patreon. So that's the premise here. Matt and Danny, what is Hinge Points?
Well, I guess I'll start. Basically, I think this came out of conversations that Matt and I have been having for a while about the present condition of the United States, the present condition of the world, and how it seems, is the way we often put it, that the algorithm has become conscious, and whether there were other moments or where things could have either gone a bit differently, or maybe things couldn't have gone a bit differently, and these where we are today is overdetermined. So what we decided to do was basically start essentially a conversation podcast where we look at particularly important quote unquote hinge points in history where things turned in a particular direction. And so what we really do is we zoom in on one particular moment and then zoom out to see the structures, the personalities, the events, and the processes that led history to go in a particular direction. And sometimes we decide that, it kind of seemed like things were going this way and nothing could have really changed it. And other times we're like, maybe if this event happened, if that guy's brain had exploded, then things would have gone in a different direction. So what we're hoping to do here is both give a sense of the complexities of history, the contingencies of history, because ultimately I think we both believe that one of the fundamental commandments of Marxism generally and left-wing thought is to really understand history and understand your moment and moments that came before you to see what we could do to change things. So it's definitely not a black pill by any stretch of the imagination, but it's exploring, how we got to where we got and whether things could have gone a bit differently.
Yeah, it's essentially an autopsy for human civilization. We just take the assumption that whatever you want to call this, it is a next stage of capitalist development in which capitalism has essentially overridden the traditional prerogatives of human agency. Now, that's not permanent, but it is the current condition. And so with that as sort of the wrap up of what you might call one attempt to create a human project, a human civilizational project. We're trying to look back at it and say, well, all right, how did this end up here? Where were the places where maybe if a contingent event that just a different combination of causal elements could have changed, you see possibilities open up that could put a trajectory that maintained human agency, I guess I would put it that, the broadest sense, as opposed to eventually see it in the late 90s and aughts closed off.
Right. And I think this also comes from the fact that we grew up in an era where contingency was just off the table. And I think we're trying to, at least I can speak for myself, I'm trying to deprogram that a little bit and sort of examine these moments where if we thought more strategically or again, some random event happened, things could have gone differently.
So I know that the first few eps that you're putting out are going to talk about the German socialists in World War I era. You've got kind of two angles on them. And just as an example of what people can expect from this, you guys want to talk about what brought you to those moments and a little bit about what your discussion in those episodes are like, SPD and the vote for war and whatnot?
Well, we both agree that that the early 20th century, specifically the crisis of World War I, is really the culminating crisis of modernity and the emergence of capitalism and the final abolition of feudal relations in Europe. And that as a result, a lot of things open up in that moment. And that is why you saw the Bolsheviks in Russia seize power when they did, because they saw this moment as crucial and saw this as the chance for that working class that had been coming into awareness over the past 70, 80 years to make its historical debut onto the world stage. And the socialist movement in Germany, the place where people like Marx sort of theoretized to be the most developed part of capitalism, and therefore the place where revolution would be carried out first, failed to create a permanent revolutionary situation. There was an early revolution that overthrew the Kaiser and instituted bourgeois democracy, but there was no secondary push. There was a secondary push, rather, for a socialist revolution that was defeated largely through the internal intervention of big parts of the labor movement. And so we are looking at this moment to see where was the potential, the realistic potential, given the conditions that we that obtained, for something else to have occurred.
Precisely. And I think those, 4 or 5 years from 1914 to 1919, 1920 are really a lost moment in the history of the international left, which is, I think if you had asked Marx, for example, in 1865, if the working classes of Europe would have annihilated themselves in a world-ending war, he would have said probably not, right? And so we're examining this particular moment, these particular moments, at least in those first couple of episodes, and then later on with the Soviet episode, to see whether that was overdetermined or whether things could have gone a different way. Because I think Matt and I agree, to some real sense, we're all living in the aftermath of 1914, where the workers didn't do what we would have liked them to do, and we're exploring why that happened, the various contingencies and complexities that led that situation to arise.
That is, I am really interested to see what you guys do with that, the general period of 1914 to about 1920, because that is, I mean, not just in Europe. I mean, there are so many pivotal things that happened in America that like permanently fucked us. Like, there was a like fledgling parallel black economy. There was a chance there, like that was the shot for like, we were far enough away from like the robbed Reconstruction where it was like, okay, we're finally like getting something together. Blacks were like black Americans were in the process of like becoming Jews. They had the opportunity to do what Jews did. And then it was just taken. You
saw these
there was a national
you
project
had a parallel
to eliminate
project
it.
of like a growing socialist political movement in the form of the Socialist Party, which was gaining offices and legitimacy at the grassroots of white America, and then this early burgeoning of a black economic engine that could have created like a meaningful black electoral and political machinery. And they're both at the same moment, basically the same summer, 1919, smothered.
It's precisely right. And it's not an excuse that like the Tulsa Race Massacre that has become famous since Watchmen happened in 1921, because it's that post-World War I period where all these alternative possibilities are closed off. You have the first Red Scare in the United States. You have the rise of the so-called Second Ku Klux Klan throughout the country. And so I think that moment is really critical. And I believe that 3 of our initial episodes actually focus on it. And we hope, if people enjoy it, we could do some, deeper histories, go back to Rome, the rise of Christianity, the Middle Ages. And so, I want
to do a whole Napoleon episode.
Oh, absolutely. We could do 3 on Napoleon, just like the revolution, his rise, and then the wars. So that's
because I do have a weird crank belief that if someone could have beaten the British before the the Council of Vienna, then something could have been different, because capitalism really is an English disease in its foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially the form that was globalized when Britain and the United States made that empire, made that sort of Anglo-American empire that dominated the last 150 years of history. So that's the type of shit we're going to look at.
Not to go back to the late 19-teens and the 1920s, but most importantly, like we've talked about some really important stuff here. That's when Germans in America lost their swag.
It's true.
That it is when they were like,
that's
well, okay,
100%
fine,
true.
we're just regular Americans.
It's
okay,
true.
fine.
It's when they acceded to calling sauerkraut Liberty cabbage. It's when they changed German street names, and when they changed like the pronunciation of things. Like there's a suburb of Milwaukee called New Berlin, and I will bet you $1 million that it was not pronounced that way in 1915. They decided no, it's Berlin.
That is amazing. Like this, like one of the biggest immigrant groups ever and you have this war that no American should ever have given a fuck about.
Yep.
And they're like, you have to give up your entire identity. And they're like, okay.
Yep. Even though they were like a lot of the spear point of that socialist party and movement, they got buck broken is what happened.
They really did.
I mean, and you think
Sucks.
about across the pond, the Mountbattens become the Windsors, right? This is a global phenomenon.
Oh, right,
where
yeah.
The Germanification of the Anglo-American world really happens in the teens.
Yep.
But like Hitler wasn't even like the guy. He wasn't even like a Hotep for Germans. He was a Nordicist.
Yeah.
He wasn't into like real German bullshit.
No. He looked so uncomfortable in that one picture of him in Lederhosen. He looks like he
Hated
wants
it.
to die.
He looked like a cat in a costume.
He did not know how to have a good time outdoors with a giant beer.
That's how you know he's not German.
Yeah. Fucker was a vegetarian.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on,
he was
man.
a real bohemian.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
So in the last few minutes of the show, I think that's a great description. Obviously, you guys are going to get into a lot of like, pretty deep and interesting stuff about, the early 20th century, middle 20th century. I've got some more recent ones that I want to throw at you and maybe, get some off the cuff what ifs from you guys. And also feel free to say that any of these are stupid questions because I just came up with them right before we started recording. All right. So here's the first one I was thinking of because I've been noticing my man more and more popping off on Twitter. John Hinckley Jr. He's out there releasing his songs. He's getting into beefs with my beloved Devo, who, from what I understand, did pay him the royalties that he was due from the song they collaborated on in 1982. So stop yelling at Gerald Casale. But anyway, here's my question. What if Hinckley hadn't missed?
Ooh.
What if Reagan
a good
gets
one.
He didn't miss, by the way. He shot him right in the chest. If he had used anything bigger than a 22, he would have got the job done. A 38 or 9mm would have done it. Of course, my fantasy, it was Deagle.
Oh my God. Oh, Reagan's, you never get to see those photos then.
No.
He's leaking.
Yeah.
He's fucking a guy that old, a 50 cal round, a fucking exit wound the size of a basketball is left in him. You're never
It's like
that.
a
They never
cartoon.
let you.
Like Nancy's looking through the hole and waving at you.
It's like when Goldie Hawn gets shot and death becomes her.
Yes, exactly.
Classic movie.
All right, so that's actually very interesting because
so what if it's
George
HW?
H.W. Bush would have obviously become president, and George H.W. Bush was he was essentially the vestigial tail of the Republican Party along for the ride during Reagan's populist revolution. It was all very personalized. In fact, so in 84, which was obviously a massive landslide victory for Reagan, that's an interesting election, though, because not only did it have not really much congressional coattails, like the Democrats kept the House, George H.W. Bush was considered by the entirety of the press corps and the media, who really mattered then, to have had a terrible campaign, to have looked bad in comparison to Gerald Ferraro, and been the pencil-necked geek that everybody had always thought he was. And him trying to sell Reaganism, which saw a massive recession in the first 2 years of his term, which is the Volcker shock kicking in, basically. But without Reagan's great communicator facade, I think there's a real chance that election is much different. That's interesting.
Also, does he do more traditional Republican economics, right? He's the voodoo economics guy. Does he stay within the New Deal order, or is capital pushing him in such a direction where he has to fully embrace the neoliberal revolution begun by Jimmy Carter? I think that's an open question.
Yeah. And you got to figure he would have much less negotiating a hand vis-a-vis Congress than Reagan did. I also, if that happens first, for one thing, I don't think Mondale is the nominee. Honestly, you know what I think happens? Gary Hart gets the nomination as like all the hippies trying to think they're voting for McGovern or RFK. And then he ends up doing Clinton's terms a few years early. Gary Hart, who was considered like the sort of anti-establishment insurgent grassroots guy, was also one of the premier neoliberals of the Democratic Party. He was the leader of the Atari Democrats who came in after Watergate, based in the affluent professional suburbs, who wanted to completely sever the connection between organized labor and the Democratic Party, and to emphasize like regulatory competence and administrative ability over any kind of class-based appeal. And I could see Gary Hart getting in '84 and just doing Clintonism early. And also probably giving arms to the Contras.
Well, that was my next thing. What does this mean for the deep state? Because George H.W. Bush was able to play that thing like a symphony. So does the deep state become even more powerful? Do you get an earlier Iran-Contra? Do you get Star Wars? Because that's not a traditional deep state thing.
Right.
That's kind of like a psychopathic populist move on behalf of Reagan. So maybe you get the continuation of the Cold War.
I mean,
in
what
different
Star
ways.
Wars was it was a way to sell the underlying policy, which was military expansion. Like it was just a way to give money to the military sector. Like and Star Wars was the way to get rubes on board with that. I mean, it didn't have to work. Not like just like all the other shit that the fucking Pentagon makes. So the question is like, I don't think there's no way Hart does Star Wars because it's antithetical to him aesthetically and to his voters aesthetically. But I certainly don't think that there's any real move towards reducing the military outlay. I think you probably get you might get like a Hart presidency with like an accelerated neoliberal timetable and maybe less military spending.
So does that mean Gorbachev could focus on internal Soviet dynamics and the Soviet Union never collapses because he doesn't have to spend all of that money? Because that would be a whole different thing in Eastern Europe.
But I mean, you do have like growing like ethnic conflict at the periphery of the USSR,
right?
That's
which is happening no
pulling
matter
at it.
what. Yeah.
So maybe you have like a more violent, protracted fall of the Soviet Union. I don't know.
Right, like a civil war, like guerrilla warfare.
I think I'm not on this here. I will say I think it's a hit to the deep state because George H.W. was so good at building that thing as being not the guy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the amount of energy he had to put into just acting normal in front of everyone was so great that it okay, this isn't totally because George H.W. was president and couldn't play the deep state like a symphony, but when did we find out about Gladio?
Yeah.
When he was president.
Right.
Well, that has more to do with with the formal end of the Cold War. But also, do you think he lets that happen?
Right.
If he's lurking in the shadows like always? Probably not.
All right. So let's go on and do one more because I know we're going to lose Danny in a second. Here's one that I think is interesting to me, but let me know if you think so. The financial crisis happens 1 year later.
That's
so after the 2008 election, it happens in 2009. What if we get one more year before the big breakdown happens?
Does that mean Clinton wins in 2000? Who's president in this scenario?
Yeah, I mean that's the question.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I think Obama won the nomination because of Iraq. So I think Obama's the nominee no matter what. And so I think it's still Obama-McCain. The result of that was going to be
Obama
closer,
wins.
certainly. I do think, though, that's very interesting.
I think Obama wins. I think Obama wins pretty much.
It's a close one,
This is a good question.
It's much closer than it ended up being.
It's more like Trump Biden.
Yeah.
Then it's one of those.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. And so then I think he still does nothing. I mean, I still think that the same thing happens in terms of bailouts, maybe even a little bit less because they were able to cover the large initial bailout because Bush had initiated the first one. So maybe that actually makes it more difficult to do as large of a bailout as Obama did when he was in office.
And while you would have the partisan response to the crisis would be much different, obviously. And I think that could make carrying out the full package of bailouts harder because there would be less incentive for Republicans to sign off the way that they did.
Precisely,
because it started under Bush and it really was this baton handed from the Bush administration to Obama. And everyone sort of understood, certainly at the top levels, that they were all on the same side on this because, of course, this is deeper than bullshit politics. This is like the actual economy. This is the thing that they're really there to serve. So I think you have probably a harder time getting it. You have probably a deeper decline because I think you have even less of you have a smaller Democratic majority to work with. You have a unified GOP to try to minimize the degree to which the Democrats could effectively respond to the crisis. So I think you probably have a more prolonged recession, contraction going longer, taking longer for the fake recovery to start. and probably maybe Trump becomes like the nominee in 2016 instead of in
2012.
I'm sorry, in
That's what I was
2012
thinking
instead of
as well.
2016.
Because you get the earlier populism, you get a more radical, less astroturf Tea Party, but then do you also get an earlier Bernie?
See, that's
you know,
the
if
question,
it's under Obama,
because,
this is the big question.
yeah,
Does he come?
You have like an accelerated
out before
time,
2015?
It took a while. It took a while for there to be any coherent like left populist response to the crisis. Like Occupy doesn't happen until 2 years after the crisis, the crash. Like it starts after the Tea Party does. But
with a smaller bailout, all that might happen earlier,
Right.
basically. Like
Things
if
are
you
worse
heighten the
earlier.
conditions,
Yeah, you're right.
and that is more extreme and it's earlier. And I think you get a Bernie earlier, and I think you get a lot of the things we
Right.
see now more radical.
But the problem is that
and
if you have
earlier.
Obama in there, then Bernie's challenge isn't going to go anywhere near as far as it did in 2016 because an incumbent president has just a smothering
Right.
influence over its nomination process. Certainly among the Democrats, way more than the
and
Republicans.
it's not against Clinton.
So
Yeah.
But maybe Bernie then runs again in 2016
Yeah.
after Trump wins, and the Democrats they didn't quite build the thing they did where they're able to trick him into into hiring some of the people he did.
yeah,
Into hiring the Warren barbershop guy like he did.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm serious. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
because
that's the
then you
thing.
get into so many what ifs. Because Ferguson is like, that's the first time Democrats like saw a black
Yeah.
president and were like, that's ours now.
No,
We're going to use some of that. Don't worry. We're not going to do anything, but we're going to use it to like call Bernie racist.
And also, again, the smaller bailout leads to more radicalism everywhere. So that also opens up an entire new possibilities that would otherwise be shut off by the larger bailout that we actually got, the genuinely bipartisan one.
Yeah. So this is basically the show.
Yeah.
It's obviously silly and gibberish. Like we're talking about things that never happened. So we can only say so much and none of it is really that meaningful, but it's one, fun. And two, I think in the course of having the conversations, you are exposed to like what really matters. You can kind of sift out the chaff from like the historical moment and find the real armature, the real structural stuff.
And I would just add to that, in professional history, counterfactual thinking is actually really critical because, as Matt said, it helps you identify what really matters and where. And I do think this could have a useful purpose in helping people think about our own moment. You know, where are the hinge points in our own histories? Where should we focus our energies? You know, should we focus on force the vote or not? Should we pay all of our attention to what's going on in Congress or not? Or what are the larger structural factors actually driving history? And I hope, and I think we did get at a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a very successful episode. Usually when
Yeah.
Will's not here, we spend about 40 minutes talking about like fast food preferences or what.
I was positive that this was the episode we were going to talk about, like if Elf was Polly or something.
Well, we'll save that for the next time. This has been this has been much more of a PBS NewsHour roundtable type vibe to it, but I appreciate that because it makes me look slightly more
We're
competent.
here with AFL-CIO Director George Meany, and we're discussing collective bargaining agreements.
No, this is McGloughstein Group where the dominant religion is Jewish instead of Catholic.
Finally,
The good McGloughstein Group.
The McGloughstein Group.
next year in Jerusalem.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for coming on. The show is Hinge Points. It will be available to all Patreon members starting on Friday. And I believe we'll actually just make the first episode of it public, and then the remaining ones will be on Patreon. I think we can tease now that we're going to keep doing these miniseries. This is Sus will be returning shortly after as a Patreon miniseries. It is happening. I have the recording of the first episode on my computer. It's coming. I think we're going to be doing something with Will, I think, about movie mindset. So, yeah, expect more of these in the new year. And one more announcement coming up. We finally are going live with our Deep State line of merch. Tomorrow morning, Tuesday at 9 a.m., shop.chapotraphouse.com, fully restocked for the holidays. The Zapata oil hat. We have a wonderful fly Air America to the Golden Triangle shirt from at Apocalypse. We have a wonderful Gladio P2 Lodge company softball T-shirt from John White there, plus some restocks of our classic gear. So shop.chapotraphouse.com. Shows in Buffalo, New York, December 8th at Asbury Hall, and Thursday, December 16th in Brooklyn at Warsaw. I will have those ticket links up somewhere, probably, hopefully, in the show notes. Finally, and I promise this is the very last thing, we have a brief plug from our good friend Josh Olson of the Movies That Made Me podcast, and of course, the West Wing thing with Dave Anthony. He writes us that he is doing a fundraiser for the Hollywood Food Coalition, which he writes, it's a great group. For over 30 years, they've been serving hot meals to LA's unhoused and food insecure population. They're a nonprofit and everyone volunteers, so contributions and donations go directly out the door to people who need it most. They currently serve between 250 and 300 people per day. So what Josh is doing is a fundraiser for them with the Movies That Made Me to tie into our Halloween or their Halloween parade episodes. They're doing what they call the Mandy Challenge. If they can raise $2,500 by November 5th, Josh's lovely wife, Nancy, will finally summon the courage to watch Mandy, and the viewing will be documented. Mandy, great movie. Very upsetting, though. If people want to help, they can go to https://hofoco.org. Click donate, and in the notes section, write Mandy Challenge. I will put that link in the show notes as well. Again, that is for Josh Olson for the Hollywood Food Coalition. All right, that's our last plug for the episode. Lots of plugs this time. For space watchers, this is a big episode. Everybody who's been watching this space, it all posted today. So